Hello, everyone. The first thing that I would like to say is that I'm really happy to be here. It's a very special day for me. It's actually my birthday. And yeah, they just got it. So, and I'm really happy to be here, honestly. My girlfriend is going to remind me these for the rest of my life. But hey, that's what it is. I really enjoy it. Now, she wouldn't do that. She's a sweetheart. Okay, I want to start giving you guys a little bit of context. So I work for, as it's already said, IG, which is a big financial company, but I'm not here to give you a sales speech or anything like that. What I want to say is that in finance, anyone that has ever worked in finance or ever heard about working in finance, you know that it's highly regulated, it's extremely complicated to actually make anything that is continuous delivery or anything like that. But I've been really, really lucky, and I work in a side of the business that actually owns absolutely everything that they deliver or they work with. So we control the code, we control the machines, we control the continuous delivery environment, we have a full stack. So ever since we make a little change in the code up to when we put it into production, that's all ours, right? And that's pretty cool for finance and very rare. So in this context, where we have this sort of ideal environment or working environment at least, a hot potato comes in, right? So what do I call a hot potato? So a hot potato is a legacy project. It's one of these big projects that nobody really wants to take care of. It's one of these old projects that's been there forever in the company and has been moved from one team to the next one. And people have been chucking functionality into it just because it's easy and they know they're not going to maintain it for long because they're going to give it to someone else. So we'll just put stuff here, throw it into the next person. And how did this arrive to us, right? So in every company, people come and go all the time. And all of a sudden, the person that used to manage this product or the team lead for this product actually left. So the resources and the products that they were maintaining in that team or they were using in that team got divided among other teams in the company. So lucky enough, one of the teams actually inherited all the resources, which is the new fashion HR word for people. And another team inherited all the code, and that was actually us, right? So lucky us. So this project, as I mentioned, it's big, it's bad, it's ugly. Nobody wants to maintain it. Everyone wants to chuck it into the next person as soon as possible. It has absolutely no build plan, so it's part of the old release cycle. I'll show that in a minute. You'll see how bad that actually was. And obviously, it's critical for the company, as it could not be any other way. The project that I'm talking about, it's called Communications, and as its name states, it handles all the communications between the company and the client. That in a financial company, in a trading company, means that every time anything happens in the market and the client wants to be informed, or the client trades or does anything, this application is the one that takes care of informing the client. And it's actually really flawed. It has a lot of issues with it. It has a lot of bugs, out-of-memory errors. It just grows memory, eats all the memory from the server, etc. It sort of works, but it just doesn't work very well, right? There are permanent issues that have to be fixed. So I don't know if any of you here have kids or anything like that. Probably some of you. So this is like having a kid. Right? It will shit on itself all the time, and when you have to go and change it, it will actually laugh at you while you're doing it. So some of you will think, okay, so how does a multi-billion company get to the point where a critical product arrives at this point, right? Well, I don't really know. I don't really know if there's anyone responsible, if there is a bunch of people, but we have a no-blame policy in the company, which means that we don't blame anyone, we try to sort things out, and we try to make everything better. But there must be someone, right? So this project, the way I have organized this talk is I'm gonna show you what the problems are, and I'm gonna show you the solutions that we try to apply to this. This is still work in progress. We've done some of the changes, we've done some of the upgrades. Some of them are still being done, and some of them are still to be started. So one of the biggest problems is that this project handles multiple responsibilities. As I mentioned before, this project, people used to chuck responsibility in just because it was sort of close and it was already bad enough. So, you know, this is already bad. Let's put some more stuff in it. We'll get away with it. We'll handle it to someone else. So one of the things it does, it manages client preferences. So there's plenty of things in every app or in every service that clients can actually, if you go to Twitter, if you go to Facebook, if you go to anything, there's plenty of settings that you can actually configure. This service doesn't handle all of them, but it handles a big number of them. So let's say that the user wants to receive all the trades he's done via SMS, but then he wants all the major market movements received via push notifications, and everything else he wants to receive it via email or whatever. So one of the things this project does is it has a huge cache where it stores all of the preferences for the client, and that's all in memory. And when the user logs in, we go to the cache, and then we go to the database if we don't have it there, and then all of that is handled in here. Obviously, it manages the sending emails, sending push notifications, etc. This is actually the core functionality of it. But it not only handles this, it also handles, so whenever we want to send an email to the client, what we have is a number of templates, and what we receive is an XML that contains all of the fields that need to be filled within this template. So we put them together, and then we send it to the client, which could definitely be somewhere else, not here. And it also manages the mobile device tokens. So we have had smartphones and tablets for a few years now, right? Let's say that the average user has been using a smartphone, or the average trader, person trading, not trader, has been managing a smartphone for the past, I don't know, let's say 10 years, right? Because they're usually early adopters. How often do you guys change your mobile phone or your tablet? Mobile phone, every 2 years, roughly, as an average. A tablet, every 3 or 4, let's say every 5. Let's say you have had 2 or 3 tablets in your life, right? Because it's sort of a little bit newer. So that means that you guys have probably about 7 or 8 devices, and let's say that you have traded with all of them, right? So we keep a registry of all the devices that users have traded with in our platform. That means that, well, none of you actually ever care of saying or telling any company or any service that you use, oh, by the way, I'm not using this phone anymore, I'm not using this device anymore. You just chuck it in a drawer, close it, forget about it, never use it again. 5 years later, you open that drawer and you say, huh, and throw it away, right? But for us, it's not that simple. Whenever there is anything happens, as long as the device is actually registered with us, we have to send you a notification. That means that we have around between 150 and 200,000 clients. Multiply that by the number of devices, and that's the number of messages that we have to send every time there is something big happening in the market. I don't know if you guys have followed the market at all lately, but it's been a bit wavy. So imagine the amount of messages that we've been having that we have to send lately. Multiply that by the number of devices, you get an idea of how bad that is. So yeah, this is how I think it looks, right? There's a little representation of the project itself. Anyway, I mentioned that it was part of the release cycle, and this is something, this is what our old release cycle looks like, right? Every blue arrow is a week. So let's say that you're at the beginning of a release cycle, or a release train that passes every couple of months, and you make a change here to the code, right? It can be small, it can be big. Let's just say an average change in the code, right? Not just a one-liner. So you check it here into the snapshot, and then you forget about it, right? You test it, it works in test, forget about it. So a week passes, other people check all the functionality into it, another week, and then it comes to the point where the snapshot gets tagged and it's moving to UAT. So there is a lockdown in the first 2 weeks of UAT, where QA actually do the thing, do the manual testing, all of their integration testing, regression, whatever, all the stuff that they do. And unless there is a critical bug here, you won't have access to change any of that. So these 2 weeks pass, yeah? And the next thing that we do is, at this point, all the small bugs are actually announced. So you have about a week to make a fix, if you make a fix, and then it will go into demo, right? With your fix or without your fix. As long as it's not critical, we promote it. And then it stays for a week in demo, which is technically a production environment as well, because you can just go into the website, create a demo account, and start trading with fake money, but just to get a hold of how trading works. And then if everything goes well in demo, you put it in production here, yeah? So that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks until it makes it to production. Let's say that you found a bug here, or you found a little bug here, yeah? Not a critical one, but a bug, so you need to fix it. You create a story, you put it in your backlog, it goes into your week, and it goes into your sprint, and then the change you made here, how many of you would remember a code change that you made 2 months ago? How many of you remember, 2 months ago, I don't even remember what city I was in. How many of you remember what you did here? That's just something that's not solution. So you have to start pretty much from scratch. So I mentioned also that it's really flawed, and I'm going to show you 3 things, just a number of examples. So all of these things that I mentioned is just for people like us, for technical people, how bad it is, right? But when you address business with it, business will go like, yeah, but this has been working for the past 10 years. Why are you complaining so much right now? Is there a new problem? Have you broken it because you just inherited it? So this is the point where it hurts business, which is maintenance costs. So this is my team, right? I'm one of these guys here. So we have a team lead, we have an architect, we have 2 senior developers, and this little guy here is a junior developer. Somebody has mentioned that we share hairdressers with Hitler, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Anyway, we can erase that from the... Anyway, so yeah, this is us. So let's say on average, we have an architect, we have a team lead, some people do a little bit more, some people do a little bit less, whatever. Let's say that on average, a developer can make between 1 and 2 points per day. Yeah, that's ideally. And every senior dev costs about £500, which is around 2,500 zlotys per day to the company. And this is actually an average number given to me by the company, right? The architect will be a bit more expensive, so will be the team lead, but then there's a junior guy, which will be cheaper, so roughly that's a number. So in a week, a person or a senior developer can make something between 5 and 10 points development and will cost the company £7,500. At the worst point of the maintenance that we have to do for this project, because there were a lot of issues, we had 3 senior people working full-time for the whole week on supporting this. So 3 senior people make between 15 and 30 points and cost the company around £7,500. Yeah? Just to give you an estimate, we inherited this project around November last year. Just to give you an estimate, we've spent more than £150,000 only on maintenance, and that's something between 300 and 600 points that we could have dedicated to something else. So we came with these numbers to management. And what management said, well, management, business, whatever, what did they say? They came to us and say, why haven't you started fixing that before? So we actually pitched this because the process in our company goes like you have to pitch it goes to the senior architect, and then the senior architect takes it to a committee, and then the committee decides whatever. It took actually a week to approve our pitch. That's like an absolute record. It normally takes like a couple of months or something like that. They approved us in a week. So Another major issue is the lack of audit in the messages. So we have two possible scenarios. The first scenario is that the client the client receives a message, a notification, and we don't know about it. So let's say there is some sort of market movement. So we deliver the message to the client receives it, and that's fine, right? You would think that's not too much of a problem. Let's say that the client receives a message that was destined to another user. Or let's say that the client receives a message that is not true. So the market went up, and we tell the client that the market went down. And we have absolutely no audit because we're not logging or we're not seeing what comes out of our platform. And let's say that the client actually panics and reacts very quickly to that message and says, oh, the market's going down, I want to sell. And he sells everything he has while the market was going up. Yeah? And the market ends the day 20 points up. So we made the client lose quite a lot of money. And this is finance. So if anything like that happens, we have to compensate financially the client. So that's pretty bad. But there's an even worse scenario in which the client doesn't receive a message. We don't know. The market is plummeting, we don't tell the client, and the market goes down like at the end of last year or at the beginning of this year. The Chinese market went down by 5%, and they actually closed the market. The government decided to close the market. There are emergency mechanisms that close the market automatically. And there was actually a real case in which some users, because there was a flaw in this service, didn't receive the message that the market was going down, and they would have acted on that. But they couldn't because they didn't receive the message. That's more money that we have to compensate our clients with. Oops, I went the wrong way, sorry. And the other thing is, and I'm going to tell you a little story about this, which now we can laugh about it, but back in the day it was not so laughable. It takes about 40 minutes to restart one of the servers. We have two servers working in production. So imagine when we have to release, we have to take down the servers. The clients are not going to receive any communication, so we have two ways of doing it. One is that we deploy one server and then the other, or we just put everything down, deploy both servers at the same time, and hope for the best, right? So I didn't know that the servers took 40 minutes to restart back in the day when we got it, right? So there was a bug in production. And so I was there coding, happy, tested it in my local environment, and tested it in test, raised all the tickets that were needed to overrun the usual process, put it in UAT, put it in demo, everything went fine, and then I went to put it in production. Right? So I was there minding, I did it, I opened Splunk, which is where we centralize the logs, and I was there monitoring my logs, and I was like, nothing's coming up, well, whatever. And all of a sudden, I see a lot of people coming my way, and it was like, I'm getting really popular here. But then I look at their faces, and it was like, maybe I'm not that popular, or I'm popular for the wrong reasons, right? So you remember that I said all of this no blaming policy, right? Well, I got a bit scolded, but actually, I didn't know. So that made me a really sad potato, right? But I learned the hard way. I mean, it's not the first time that I screw up something in production in my career, which goes against me, but sometimes you don't know a certain number of things. But you see how bad we were 40 minutes with a system that was meant to tell the clients how the market is going. They were never receiving absolutely anything. And all of a sudden, after 40 minutes, they go like 20 alerts at the same time. So, not brilliant. So it was refurbishment time, right? So those are some of the flaws and that I wanted you guys to know and see how not useful or not healthy the product was. So we actually wanted to achieve three things, right? So we focused on these things as the main things we wanted to do at the beginning. We wanted to do some re-architecturing because there was no architecture whatsoever, or if there was one once, it had completely been buried under layers of code that made absolutely no sense to us. We wanted to reach zero downtime deployment because I didn't want to get scolded again. And we wanted to detach from the old release cycle. So, re-architecture, yeah? let's get started with. So we gathered the whole team, and we sat together in a room. And what do developers do when they gather all together in a room to re-architecture something? They draw squares, right? I actually have a friend who's a colleague of mine. It's actually our architect that says, we don't get paid unless we draw at least 10 square boxes per day, right? So that's exactly what we did. But we didn't draw them. We actually got posters and put it on the wall. So this is what our re-architecture looks like. So we kept some core functionality, yeah, which is all sending SMS, which is generating the SMSs, etc., getting ready to send them. But then we started architecturing a certain number of microservices, which was when we want to send an SMS to the client, when we want to send a notification to the client, it can be any of these three types. But why can't we have like little dumb services that are very small? And we would not have to worry about them anymore if all they do is we send them a message or we put a message in a queue, they read from the queue and they send either the message, the push notification, or the text, right? We also wanted to have a little service in between in which when we receive the message, when we have the template, we want to fill the template because we only did that in emails, but that's something that could potentially be done either in SMSs or in push notifications. So we wanted to separate that a little bit. So that was our original idea, or that is work in progress at the moment. And there is one thing that was pretty lucky for us, and it's at some point during all of this re-architecture, somebody came up with a new requirement, right? We need new flows. We need to send new sort of, we have a new way of communicating with the client, etc. And that was pretty good for us because it had happened that not long ago, not long before we did this, we had read a story or we had read something written by Martin Fowler, whom you probably know here, called the strangle pattern, which is something not so common, and most of you might not have heard of it. Anyone has heard about the strangle pattern? Any hands up? Yeah, 1, 2? Well, I'll assume a few people, but not all of you. So what the strangle pattern says is that when he was on holidays in, I don't know if it was Australia or New Zealand, he went to see the strangle vines, right? Strangle vines are these vines that grow next to a tree and they surround it, and apparently they're really beautiful. I've never seen them, but apparently they're really beautiful. But they go around this tree, and what they do is they flourish while they kill the tree that they're going around. And apparently that gave him the idea that if you have a service that you don't want to use anymore, try to grow it around the service. Try to create these vines around the service, and as soon as you can, extract the functionality from the core, so the core gets rotten, while the vines stay alive and they flourish, and at some point you'll be able to extract the core and have a very healthy service without actually having to rewrite everything from scratch. And that is actually our approach. That's exactly what we're doing at the moment. So we are taking out all of the flows little by little and putting them around the core, so at some point we're able to extract the rotten core and just have the things that we want to have, right? So that's re-architecture. We wanted to reach 0 downtime on deployment. And we have two options, or two obvious options. The first one's Canary release, the second one's blue-green deployment. The problem is we only had 2 servers, right? So if we don't want to have, we had 2 options, as in we can either try to reduce the amount of time that the servers try to restart and just try to redeploy them very quickly before actually anyone notices, but being 40 minutes is actually quite unrealistic. Or we can deploy 1 server, wait for it to start, and then check that everything is all right, and then deploy it onto the next server. Or we had the blue-green deployment. So we could have 1 machine green and the other one in blue. But then again, since we only had 2 machines, that means we will only have 1 active machine in production, while the other one will not be in use. So that means that if the machine fails, then we'll have to change the pointer, and we will have only 1 machine working, and while the other one could be in a completely unstartable, that we could not start it again. So that was really bad. Both choices were not really optimal. So what we did is, since we had business on our side, we went to them and we said, we need more machines. And it was like, but why don't you guys refurbish in? And we said, hey, £150,000. And it was like, here, have some more servers. So we don't have them just yet. So right now, what we're doing is we're doing a little bit of canary release, so we can keep both servers at the same time. But we also did something pretty cool, and is right now, startup time is under a minute. It's around 58 seconds, but I can say it's under a minute, so that's pretty cool. And it was due to all the massive load we do on a startup on our cache about all the configuration of the users. So we optimized that so much. Well, it was not very hard to optimize, but it was so bad in the beginning that nobody cared, and it took 40 minutes to restart. But that is our ideal environment once we get everything ready. And the last thing we wanted to do is we wanted to detach from the old release cycle. So I went there all happy. We have a Bamboo instance, now Bamboo 5. And I went there and was like, oh, I'm going to create my own Bamboo plan for all of these, and I'm going to deploy here, and I'm going to deploy there, and blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, it's like, yeah, this is brilliant, but if it takes 40 minutes to deploy, then I cannot use it. Yes, we optimize it to 1 minute, but they're still going to tell us off if we have 1 minute downtime deployment once a day or however often we decide to deploy. So my Bamboo plan is there. It works, as in I can commit and we can deploy into test, but that's as far as it gets. So the Bamboo plan is sitting there, waiting for the new machines to arrive so we can actually deploy everything. So what did we learn from this? The first thing we learned is that we need to get business on our side. That's critical. In anything as big as this, if you don't have business on our side, the first thing they will say, your product owner, who is the first approach for business, will say, yeah, but that is not on the critical path. So whenever you get some spare time, you can do that. And spare time is never there. Spare time never arrives, right? So having business on our side was pretty useful. Also, we needed new machines. They were happy to give them to us, and that's very rare as well. Deal with your own stuff. It says the stuff there, actually. If you have, sorry, I get distracted with these things. So if you have a service, if you have anything, you have a product, whatever you have, it's yours, you own it. It doesn't matter if someone actually gave it to you, someone threw you a difficult teenager, or it's your baby and you created it from scratch. Think about handling to someone else. How would you feel if you were the other person and you gave him a piece of crap that the other person has to maintain? When you're doing something, even if it takes a little longer, or even if it takes a little bit of extra effort, do it right. Because when you leave the company and that happens forever, you don't want to be remembered as that guy, which is what's going to happen otherwise. And the last major thing is always use an incremental approach. Since we got given green light, we were all like, yeah, I mean, we have all the time in the world, we're going to use like a whole sprint to do this, and we all jump into different bits, and I run into the Bamboo plan, and someone ran into rewriting a little bit of code here, and somebody ran, and all of a sudden, we realized that each of us was actually going in a completely different direction, and we were all doing the same thing, but we tried to do everything at once. That actually never happened. That's why at some point we realized that the strangle pattern was the way forward. And the last thing that I want to say is that be proud about what you do. That's something that happens quite a lot in IT, and it's really, really good. But there's something that we do a lot as well, and is when we do something, we never take, or we rarely take a step back, and we are critic with the things that we do. So if you do something and you're not sure about what you're doing, just take a step back, take a look at it, and if you're not happy with it, roll up your sleeves and do a little bit more. Do that extra mile that will give you that feeling that when you're done, it's just like, yeah, this is something that I could handle to someone else. So in my experience, or with this project, this is how you turn a hot potato into like a white potato, right? Okay, well, that's pretty much the whole presentation. Thank you very much, guys. And if you have any questions.
Okay, do you have the questions about dealing with critical project? Yeah, there's one question in the back.
No. Can someone handle? Cheers.
So I had the hot potato in the past, and one thing that was even worse than giving it away was when it was taken away from me in the middle of covering it with wines around. Mm-hmm. And I multiple times received a thing that became a hot potato because people started to refactor it in completely different direction, and then were taken away from the project to something else, and that created even more mess. Do you have anything to keep the project till it's good?
Well, we're not at that stage yet. We're at the stage where if someone took it away from us, that'd be brilliant. But no, we're working on it. We're working on it really hard, and it's very exciting because it's something that requires a lot of effort and a lot of knowledge, and we're very motivated about it. The thing is, as you said, this project for us has absolutely nothing to do with what my team does. So I work in big data, and we're doing all of the Spark jobs and whatnot. And this actually handles communications with clients. That is something that has absolutely nothing to do with that. As in, sometimes it's a business decision. When it's a business decision, there's very little that we technical people can do. But if it's something that you can do, the best way or your best argument against it is that you're the specialist about it. Nobody in the company normally knows more than you if you actually do something like that. So if I were to say something as in my excuse to keep it, it's just either follow wherever it goes, or just say that you are the specialist and that's the main reason why you should keep it. Yes, it's good that so in a company, I've never believed in just one person having all the knowledge. But what you can say is, okay, I can give away like part of it, but so people can actually learn, and we're a bunch of people taking care of it. But you will still be the reference point for that because it's your baby at the end of the day, or it's the bad teenager that you turn into an adult that you can be proud of, right?
I wanted to ask about more practical approach about changes that are made to the project during refinement, because when, for example, one functionality needs to be improved that its scope is more full system-wide, and we are already refining some of this. Then we have doubled the job. And I want to ask you, how do you practically deal with that situations? Yes.
Okay, so the way we approach it, as I said, we had this, we received this new requirement, right? To actually have new functionality in there. So our easiest approach, or the first idea that we had was, let's take the most simple one and start from there, right? So we can actually say, this is going to send only push notifications. Okay, let's build that bit that I mentioned about the push notifications here. Sorry, press the wrong button. So let me see. Here. There. So let's just write. Gosh, sorry about that. There. So let's just write the bit that actually sends the push notifications, because this is only going to send that bit, right? But then our architect came in, and he said, no, let's just not do the easiest one. Let's go for the hardest one. And it was like, all of us were a bit like, no, we really don't want to do that, because this is a mess, and it's going to break everything. But then he came up with a really good reason. And he said, if we're able to do the hardest one first, all the others will be extremely easy to follow, right? So, and it turns out that he was right. So we took the hardest one. We put a lot of time into coding, and we put a lot of time into trying to take out the bad parts that we encountered along the way. The ones that we could reuse, we would reuse it, but we'll put them into the new modules. And the bad parts, we will just rewrite them, marking them as deprecated, as at some point we were going to get rid of them. So our approach was the opposite of decremental, if you want to call it that way. Let's do the hardest piece first. It's going to be really bad. It's going to be very painful, But once we go through the pain, this is like a childbirth, right? I'm not that I felt the pain ever, but what I heard of. The first one is really, really bad, but then what comes after is not so bad. Even if you don't sleep for like 6 months or 6 years or whatever, it's not so bad as the first pain. And that's the approach we took, and that's working for us so far.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I just wanted to ask you how defined was the backlog, or you had your business defining another functionalities in the middle of the work, or?
So we have a product owner, right? So my team is based in London, but our product owner is here, so we don't really pay much attention to him anyway. But we reached an agreement in which we said, okay, we're going to deliver a little bit of functionality for all the rest of the stuff, because at the end of the day, if you're ahead of the curve and you stop delivering new functionality, very quickly you just lose your head in position and just you're gone from the market, right? So we pretty much divide it like half and half, or at least in every sprint, we try to put one story related to all of this refurbishment, even if it's a big one that will carry on into the next sprint, and some extra functionality that we need to deliver. Most of the functionality that we get delivered is new Spark jobs to analyze data from the Hadoop cluster, which, since we already have a number of them, is not so hard for us, so we can actually balance it up pretty well. And that's something that I got asked the other day, because I did this presentation internally in the office, and a guy actually asked me, so how do you do it? Do you just do these for 6 months? It's like, no, there's no way any business will actually allow us to do only these for 6 months, because it adds absolutely no business value to it.
Okay, so you had to mix both streams.
Yes, so that's what I said. We reach an agreement with our product owner, okay, as in we'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but just know that this is business approved and it needs to be done, because it's eating our time away completely.
And money. Yeah, well, it seems to be the most important. Okay, thank you so much for your speech. Applause, please.
Thank you.